Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are not just reviewing a book. We are uh, maybe performing an autopsy on the American dream.
That's a strong way to put it.
Well, we're tackling a text that has likely triggered more heated dinner table debates, more sudden career pivots, and more uncomfortable realizations than I think almost any other personal finance book in the last 30 years.
Oh, for sure.
We are talking about The Purple and Gold Juggernaut, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
It is a monster of a topic. And, frankly, it's a polarizing one.
Very
You have people who treat this book like the gospel of financial freedom, and then you have traditional financial academics who treat it like absolute heresy.
right. But our mission today isn't to take sides in that culture war. We aren't here to endorse the man or the brand.
No. Our mission is to strip the engine apart and see how it actually runs. We want to understand the machinery of the argument Kiyosaki is making.
Exactly. We want to go way beyond the bumper stickers. Everyone knows the title, and most people know the basic buy real estate catchphrase that's associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at our source material, the book is actually much more psychological than it is technical. It's less about a calculator and more about a fundamental rewiring of the brain.
That is the perfect way to frame it. It's a book about mental literacy disguised as a book about money.
Right.
And to understand that, we have to start with the narrative device that holds the whole thing together. The tale of the two fathers. It's almost Dickensian in its setup.
It really is a classic literary setup. You have Robert, the protagonist, growing up in Hawaii in the 1950s, and he's torn between two conflicting ideologies represented by these two men.
Yeah.
So let's break down who they were, because the labels rich and poor are actually a bit misleading at the start, aren't they?
They are. And that's the irony that really hooks you in the first chapter. The poor dad wasn't what society would call a failure. Far from it.
Not at all.
This was Kiyosaki's biological father. He held a PhD. He was arguably one of the smartest men on the islands. He was the superintendent of education for the state of Hawaii.
So we're talking about a man with job security, a government pension, a high salary, and immense social respect. I mean, he checked every single box that society tells you to check.
Every single one. Massive respect. But according to the narrative, he struggled financially his entire life.
Whoa.
Died with bills to pay. He was the embodiment of the study hard, get good grades, get a safe job path. He believed that the government and the company would take care of you if you were a good citizen.
Okay, so that's poor dad. Then you have rich dad.
Who wasn't actually his dad.
Hey, this is his best friend's father.
Exactly. His best friend Mike's father. This
Hey.
man never finished the 8th grade.
An 8th grade dropout.
Yeah. But he was a capitalist in the rawest sense. An entrepreneur who built an empire of convenience stores, construction, real estate. He became one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii.
So the setup for this deep dive is a 9-year-old boy standing at a fork in the road. He's realized that his biological dad and his rich dad are giving him completely contradictory advice. One says, the love of money is the root of all evil.
And the other says, the lack of money is the root of all evil.
Total opposites.
And that's the hook. At 9 years old, Robert made a conscious choice. He decided that when it came to money, he was going to tune out the PhD and tune in the 8th grade dropout.
And it wasn't about disrespect.
No, not at all. It wasn't about disrespecting his father's intellect. It was about realizing that academic intelligence and financial intelligence are not the same thing.
Okay, so let's get into the actual lessons, because the first one starts with a story that is honestly hilarious, but also kind of illegal. This is the lead nickel story.
It's a fantastic anecdote because it shows just how literal kids are. So Robert and Mike go to Rich Dad, before he was known as Rich Dad, and ask him how to make money.
Just a straight up question.
Yeah, and he's busy, so he essentially shooed them away and told them to use their heads and make money. He meant, be creative.
Be entrepreneurial.
Right. So they go home and they start collecting toothpaste tubes from around the neighborhood.
Now, we need to clarify for the younger listeners, or even those of us who aren't from the 50s, toothpaste tubes back then weren't plastic.
No, they were made of lead. Soft, malleable lead.
Lead, okay.
So these two 9-year-olds set up a full-scale industrial foundry in the driveway. They build a charcoal fire, they get a pot from the kitchen, and they melt down these lead tubes.
Oh, my God.
Then they pour the molten lead into plaster molds they had made using milk cartons. Robert's biological dad drives up, sees the smoke and fire, and runs over asking what on earth they're doing.
And Robert looks up, covered in soot, absolutely beaming with pride, and says, we're doing what you told us. We're making money.
Literally casting nickels out of lead.
Mhm.
They thought making money meant manufacturing currency.
Which is counterfeiting.
It is federal counterfeiting, yeah.
Yeah.
And the poor dad has to gently explain, boys, you can't do that. That's illegal.
Of course.
But, and this is a key moment in the book, he tells them, I'm proud of your creativity. You're only poor if you give up.
So he encourages the spirit of it.
Yes, but he admits he doesn't know how to teach them to make money legally, so he sends them back to Mike's dad.
And this is where the real education begins.
Yeah.
Rich Dad agrees to teach them, but he refuses to do it in a classroom.
Right. He says, I'll teach you, but life pushes you around, so I'm going to push you around.
And he pushes hard.
Oh, yeah. He hires them to work in one of his convenience stores. The pay, 10 cents an hour.
10 cents. Even in the 1950s, that was an insult.
A total insult. They had to work for 3 hours every Saturday, dusting cans of food. And if you've ever dusted cans in a humid climate, you know it's just miserable work.
And to make it worse, they have to do it while all the other kids are out playing baseball.
Exactly. Robert hates it. I mean, who wouldn't? He's 9 years old, he's bored, he's underpaid, he feels exploited.
So he's ready to quit.
After a few weeks, absolutely. He marches to Rich Dad's house to demand a raise or he's walking out.
Okay. And this confrontation leads to the first major psychological concept of the book.
Yes. The rat race. When Robert demands the raise, claiming he's being cheated, Rich Dad stays calm. He reveals that the low pay was a trap.
A trap.
He wanted Robert to get angry. He wanted him to feel that specific combination of emotion.
It's fear and desire.
Exactly. Rich Dad argues that most people's financial lives are controlled by these two emotions, not by their rational brains.
Okay, break that down for us.
So first, there is fear. The fear of not having money. That fear forces you to get a job. You wake up, you go to work, not because you are passionate about data entry or dusting cans, but because you are afraid of not paying the rent.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then once you get the paycheck, the second emotion kicks in, desire.
That's when the money burns a hole in your pocket.
Right. You see the money and suddenly the rational brain shuts off and you think about the candy, the bike, the new car, the house. You think about all the joy that money can buy.
So you spend the money to satisfy the desire,
You do.
but then the money's gone.
And the fear comes back. Oh no, I have bills. I'm broke. So you go back to work. And the cycle repeats. Work, get paid, spend. Work, get paid, spend.
That's the rat race.
That is the rat race. And it doesn't matter if you make 10 cents an hour or $100 an hour. If you are trapped in that cycle of fear and desire, you're in it.
He uses a pretty brutal metaphor for this, the donkey and the carrot.
It is a haunting image. He says most employees are like a donkey pulling a cart. The owner, the boss, is sitting in the cart dangling a carrot in front of the donkey's nose.
Okay.
The donkey is chasing the carrot, thinking he's going to get it, but he never does. He's just providing the power to move the owner's cart.
And the carrot is the paycheck.
The carrot is the paycheck. It's an illusion of security that keeps you moving, but you never actually get anywhere.
That hits hard. I mean, it reframes the idea of a good job from a prize into a lure.
It does.
So how does he teach these 9-year-olds to break that cycle? Because he does something that seems completely counterintuitive. He takes away the 10 cents.
He tells them, now you work for free.
For free. I think most adults would have quit right there. I mean, you want me to work for free? I'm out.
Most would because they are addicted to the carrot. But the lesson was to force their brains to disconnect the action of work from the reward of a paycheck.
Ah.
If you aren't getting paid and you're still working, your brain starts to panic. But then if you stay with it, your brain starts to look for other ways to solve the problem.
So it forces a shift.
It forces a shift from an employee mindset, waiting to be given money, to an entrepreneurial mindset, looking for opportunities to take money.
It actually worked for them. So they're dusting these cans for free, miserable, and suddenly they notice something.
They noticed the comic books. The distributor would come in, cut the top half of the cover off the unsold comics to claim credit, and throw the rest of the book in the trash.
Right, to prove they were destroyed.
Exactly. So Robert and Mike asked the distributor, can we have those? The guy said, sure, as long as you don't resell them.
So they didn't resell them. They opened a library.
This is the genius of it. They took the trash, put it in Mike's basement, and charged the neighborhood kids 10 cents admission.
That's brilliant.
It was. A comic book cost 10 cents to buy back then, but for 10 cents admission, a kid could read 5 or 6 comics in 2 hours? It was a value bargain for the kids.
And the best part, they didn't even run the library themselves.
No, they hired my sister. They paid her $1 a week to check the kids in and out.
So they're off playing baseball.
Robert and Mike were at school or playing baseball, and the business was generating money. They went from working for 10 cents an hour to making nearly $10 a week without physically being there.
That is the crucial distinction.
Yeah.
They stopped chasing the carrot. They built a machine, the
Yeah.
library, that produced carrots for them.
Precisely. They decoupled their time from their income. And that leads us directly into the second and perhaps the most technical section of the book,
Okay.
the definition of an asset versus a liability.
This is where things get sticky, because if you talk to a CPA or a banker, they have very strict, complex definitions of assets.
Right. It involves equity, depreciation schedules, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. But Rich Dad's definition is almost childishly simple.
It is simple, but Kiyosaki argues that the complexity is what keeps people poor. He
Mhm.
says financial literacy starts with understanding this one rule.
That's the rule.
Rule number one, you must know the difference between an asset and a liability and buy assets.
Okay.
And here's his definition. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay, that sounds great on a bumper sticker. But when you apply it to real life, it challenges one of the biggest sacred cows in American culture,
The home.
the house.
This is where the fight starts. Kiyosaki states flatly, your house is not an asset.
Mm.
It is a liability.
I can hear the listeners screaming at their speakers right now. But it appreciates. It's the biggest investment I'll ever make. It has equity.
Yeah, all of that.
So how does he justify calling a house a liability?
He looks at the direction of the cash flow. That's his only metric. Does your house put a check in your mailbox every month?
No.
No. Every month, the house demands money. You have the mortgage payment, you have property taxes, you have insurance, you have the water heater that blows up, the new roof.
Right, there's always something.
Always, even if you pay off the mortgage, you still have taxes and maintenance. Cash flows out. Therefore, by his definition, it is a liability.
So what about the appreciation argument? The idea that I bought it for $200,000 and now it's worth $300,000.
Rich Dad would call that speculation, not investing. He'd say, you can't eat appreciation. You only realize that gain if and when you sell. And usually when people sell, they just buy a bigger, more expensive house, which increases their expenses even more.
Right, you just scale up the liability.
Exactly. And the other point he makes is about opportunity cost. If you take all your savings and dump it into a down payment and then tie up your monthly income in a high mortgage, you have no money left to buy actual income-generating assets.
You lose the time.
You lose the time your money could have been growing.
So to be clear, he's not saying don't buy a house. He's saying don't buy a house and trick yourself into thinking it's a business.
Exactly. Don't rely on it to make you rich. Buy it because you want to live in it, but recognize it as a luxury that costs you money.
This leads to the visual diagrams he uses in the book. He draws these cash flow patterns for the poor, the middle class, and the rich. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. Imagine a spreadsheet with an income column, an expense column, an asset column, and a liability column.
Got it.
For the poor, the pattern is a straight line. Income comes in from a job and goes straight out the expense column. Rent, food, clothes, transportation, income equals expenses.
For nothing is left.
Nothing left to put in the asset column. Now, the middle class, this is the trap.
Okay.
Income comes in from a job, but instead of buying assets, they buy things they think are assets. They buy a big house, a nice car, a boat, maybe a vacation home. These go into the liability column because they generate monthly payments.
Right.
So the money comes in, circles through the liability column, and goes out the expense column.
I see.
Now, the rich, this pattern is completely different. They focus entirely on the asset column.
Okay.
They buy stocks, bonds, income-generating real estate, notes, intellectual property. These assets generate income dividends, rent, royalties.
So the rich don't work for income directly. They work to acquire assets.
Exactly. They work to acquire assets. The assets then generate the income. And here's the kicker, the part that really separates the wealthy from the high earners. The rich use that asset income to buy their luxuries last.
What do you mean?
The middle class buys a Porsche with their salary. They sweat for that car. The rich buy a rental property. The profit from the rental property pays for the Porsche.
Oh, that's a huge distinction.
Huge.
In one scenario, the Porsche is a drain on your life. In the other, the Porsche is essentially free because your capital is still intact and producing money.
Exactly. You keep the golden goose, you just eat the eggs. The middle class cooks the goose.
He also brings up a definition of wealth from Buckminster Fuller that I found really interesting. It strips away the dollar signs entirely.
Yes. Fuller's definition is about survivability, he says. Wealth is the number of days you can survive without physically working, or anyone in your household working, and still maintain your standard of living.
So it's measured in time.
Measured in time. So if your monthly expenses are $5,000 and you have $20,000 in savings, your wealth is approximately 4 months.
Okay.
But if your assets, your rental properties, dividends, business interests generate $5,000 a month in cash flow and your expenses are $5,000,
You are infinitely wealthy.
you're infinitely wealthy because you never have to work again. The machine runs itself.
You are financially free.
Right. And that is the goal Kiyosaki pushes for. It's not to have $1 million in the bank. It's to have cash flow that exceeds expenses.
Okay, so we have the mindset, don't work for money, and we have the mechanism, buy assets, not liabilities. Now we need to talk about structure. This brings us to the section on minding your own business. And there is a famous story here about McDonald's.
This is the Ray Kroc anecdote. So Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, was speaking to a class of MBA students at the University of Texas. And he asked them, "What business am I in?"
And they all laugh.
Yeah, they laughed. They said, "Ray, obviously you're in the hamburger business." And Ray chuckled and said, "No, I'm not in the hamburger business. I'm in the real estate business."
That seems confusing at first. They sell burgers.
They sell franchises, but the underlying contract was that the franchisee had to lease the land from McDonald's.
Wow, there it is.
McDonald's chose the location, usually the most expensive intersection in town, bought the land, and then leased it to the operator. So the profession was selling franchises. The business was accumulating the most valuable real estate portfolio in the world.
And Kiyosaki uses this to make a distinction between your profession and your business.
Right. And this is a subtle but vital distinction. Your profession is what you do 9 to 5 to pay the bills.
Your job.
Your job. You are a banker, a teacher, a welder.
Huh.
That's your trade. Your business is what you do with your money. It's your asset column.
I see.
He argues that most people spend their entire lives minding someone else's business. They work for the boss, making the boss rich. They work for the government, paying taxes. And they work for the bank, paying off their mortgage. They never stop to mind their own business.
So the advice isn't necessarily quit your job tomorrow.
No, not at all. It's keep your day job, be a good employee, but start building your asset column on the side. Don't spend your salary on liabilities. Pour it into the asset column until the asset column grows big enough to replace the salary.
Now, if we're talking about keeping money, we have to talk about the biggest expense most of us face.
Taxes.
Taxes. Rich Dad has a very specific take on the history of taxes. He calls it the Robin Hood theory.
He does. He gives a bit of a history lesson. He explains that originally in England and the U.S., there were no regular income taxes. They were temporary measures for wars. When the income tax was made permanent, the 16th Amendment in the U.S., it was sold to the public as a tax only on the rich. Take from the rich, give to the poor. That's why the masses voted for it.
But the problem with government programs is that they tend to grow.
The government's appetite is insatiable. To fund the growing machinery, the tax base had to expand. It trickled down to the upper middle class, then the middle class, and eventually the poor.
So the Robin Hood idea backfired.
Massively. The rich saw it coming and found ways to protect their money. The middle class ended up paying the bill.
And the primary tool the rich use to protect that money is the corporation.
Now, we need to demystify this. When people hear a corporation, they think of a skyscraper with a logo on it.
Right.
Kiyosaki emphasizes that a corporation is just a legal document. It's a folder in an attorney's office. But that folder contains magic powers.
Magic powers like...
Like spending pre-tax dollars. This is the biggest structural advantage.
Okay, what does that mean?
If you are an employee, the flow of money is.
Hmm.
You earn, the government takes its cut, so you pay taxes, and then you spend what is left.
Yeah, standard way.
But if you are a corporation, the flow is you earn, you spend everything you can as business expenses, and then you pay taxes on what is left.
Can you give us a concrete example of that?
Sure. Let's say you are an employee and you want to buy a high-end computer for your work. You have to earn, say, $2,000, pay $500 in taxes, and use the remaining $1,500 to buy the computer.
Okay.
If you own a corporation, the corporation buys the computer for $1,500. That $1,500 is an expense. It reduces the taxable income. So you are buying it with pre-tax dollars.
And the same logic applies to cars, travel, meals.
If they are legitimate business expenses, yes. If you have a board meeting in Hawaii, the corporation pays for the flight and the hotel. That's a write-off.
It's playing the game by a different rule book. It's not evasion.
No.
It's just using the tax code as it was written for business owners.
Exactly. The tax code is designed to incentivize business and investment. The rich understand this. The poor and middle class generally don't. They just see taxes as something that happens to them rather than something they can manage.
Okay, moving into section 4. Developing financial IQ. We've got the mindset, the asset definition, the corporate structure. But how do you actually find the deals? Kiyosaki talks about how the rich invent money.
This is a great chapter because it addresses self-doubt. He says, in the real world, it's not the smart who get ahead, but the bold.
I've heard that before.
We all know people who are incredibly intelligent but are stuck financially because they are terrified of taking a risk. They analyze things until they are paralyzed.
He uses a pop culture example that is a total blast from the past.
Yeah.
The Tickle Me Elmo craze.
Oh, the chaos of the Elmo dolls. It perfectly illustrates supply and demand. The dolls were scarce. Parents were panicking because Christmas was coming.
For that.
The store price was maybe $20, but scalpers were selling them for $200 or $300. Now, Kiyosaki isn't telling us to scalp dolls. He's using it to show that money is invented when you see an opportunity in the market that others don't.
So seeing the gap.
Seeing the gap. He contrasts savers with investors. A saver puts money in the bank and prays for 2% interest. An investor creates a deal. They see a property that is run down, they see the potential value, they negotiate a lower price, they fix it up, they invent the equity by seeing with their mind what others missed with their eyes.
And to do that, you need skills. This brings us to the concept of work to learn, don't work for money.
This is crucial advice, especially for young people. Don't take a job for the paycheck. Take it for what it can teach you.
Right.
There's a story about a young female reporter in Singapore. She was talented, wrote great prose, and she asked Robert for advice on how to become a best-selling author like him.
And Robert told her to take a sales training course.
And she was insulted. She said, I have a master's degree in English literature. I am a professional. I am not going to be a used car salesman. And she started packing up her briefcase.
Wow. She missed the point entirely.
She did. Robert pointed to his own book. He said, look at the cover. It says best-selling author, not best writing author.
Oof. That's blunt.
Very. He admitted he was a terrible writer, but a great salesman. She was a great writer, but a terrible salesman. If she learned to sell, she would be unstoppable.
But her arrogance.
Her arrogance, her view that sales was beneath her, kept her poor.
This goes back to the difference between the two dads' philosophies on education. The educated dad believed in specialization.
Right. Learn more and more about less and less. Join a union. Protect your niche. That's the academic way.
And rich dad's view.
Rich dad believed in generalization. He wanted to know a little about a lot. He groomed Mike and Robert by moving them around his companies. 1 month in accounting, the next in sales, then in construction, then in marketing. He wanted them to understand the synergy of the whole system.
Kiyosaki uses the acronym for JOB. Just overbroke. He argues that if you specialize too much, you become dependent. If your industry shrinks or technology replaces your specialty, you're finished.
Yeah.
But if you have broad skills, specifically the management of cash flow, management of systems, and management of people, you can adapt to anything.
Those are the 3 pillars of management he lists. If you can manage cash, systems, and people, you can run a burger stand or you can run a multinational corporation.
But even with all these skills, even with the knowledge, people still fail. Why? Section 5 deals with the roadblocks.
There are 5 major obstacles he lists: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. But we really need to focus on the big 2, fear and cynicism.
Let's start with fear, specifically the fear of losing money.
Everyone is afraid of losing money. The rich are afraid of it too. The difference is how you handle it.
Okay.
He brings up the Texas attitude here. Remember the Alamo?
Which is an interesting metaphor because the Alamo was a disaster. They all died.
It was a total military defeat. But how did Texans handle it? Did they give up? No. They turned it into a victory cry. Remember the Alamo? They used the failure as fuel to win the war.
So failure becomes motivation.
Exactly. Rich Dad says winning means being unafraid to lose. He points out that he has never met a rich person who has never lost money, but he has met plenty of poor people who have never lost a dime because they never invested.
He also attacks the concept of balance. You know, financial advisors always tell you to have a balanced portfolio.
And Rich Dad hates that. He says balanced people go nowhere. They stay in one spot.
Wow.
If you look at the great successes, Edison, Gates, Jobs, They weren't balanced. They were focused. They put a lot of eggs in a few baskets and watched those baskets like a hawk.
So balance is safe.
He argues that balance is a strategy for people who are playing not to lose, but if you want to get rich, you have to play to win.
That brings us to cynicism, the Chicken Little syndrome. The sky is falling.
We all have this voice. It's the doubt. What if the economy crashes? What if the tenants trash the house? And if it's not in our own heads, it's coming from our friends or the news.
Right. The noise.
The noise. Kiyosaki tells a story about a friend who was looking at a great real estate deal. It was a sure thing. But then a neighbor told him, the market is going to crash. That's a bad buy. The Hun backed out.
And the neighbor was an expert.
The kicker. The neighbor wasn't an investor. He had no idea what he was talking about. But the friend let the neighbor's cynicism, the noise, talk him out of a fortune.
Rich Dad says cynicism blinds you to opportunity. Noise keeps you poor. Analysis opens your eyes.
Exactly. It comes down to who you are listening to. Are you listening to people who are afraid or people who are actually doing it?
We have covered a massive amount of ground here. I mean, from melting lead in a driveway to corporate tax loopholes, let's try to bring this all together.
Okay.
What is the ultimate synthesis of Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
If you strip away the real estate and the accounting, the core message is that money is an idea.
An idea.
Yes. If you believe that money is real and that you have to trade your time to get it, you will spend your life as the donkey chasing the carrot. You will work hard, pay taxes, and wonder why you can't get ahead.
That was the path of the educated dad.
Exactly. He sought security. But if you realize that money is something you can control, that you can build systems to generate it for you, then you gain freedom. That was the path of the rich dad.
And the choice starts in your head. It
Yes.
starts with the language you use.
Mhm.
Instead of saying, I can't afford it, which shuts down your brain,
Right.
you say, how can I afford it?
Yeah.
Which opens up possibilities.
That's it. One is a statement of resignation. The other is a question that triggers the mind to work.
So here is our final thought for the listener.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about these two dads as characters in a book,
Mm.
but really they are two voices in your own head.
Mm-hmm.
One voice says, play it safe, don't take risks, your house is your biggest asset. The other voice says, learn the system, take calculated risks, buy assets that pay you. The question isn't which dad was a better person. They were both good men who loved their kids. The question is, which dad are you listening to when you sign your paycheck or look at a real estate listing?
That is the question. And I would add, you don't have to choose one entirely. You can keep your job and be a good employee while secretly building your empire on the side. But you have to know the difference between the two games.
Absolutely. And a quick disclaimer before we sign off. We are just reporters here. We're unpacking Robert Kiyosaki's text.
Yep.
We aren't financial advisors, and we're certainly not telling you to go sell your house tomorrow or start a counterfeit nickel operation in your driveway.
Please do not melt lead. It's bad for your health and your criminal record.
We are just exploring the source material,
Yeah.
but it is definitely material that forces you to think. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.
See you next time.